Welcome to this DHS OHA Building Immunity to Traumatic Exposure training. We hope you enjoy the introductory training and will learn valuable information leading to self-reflection around your own unique experiences and how these things have affected your ability to function both at work and home. This presentation is sponsored by the Department of Human Services, the Oregon Health Authority, and the Leadership Academy 2015-2016 cohort. By the end of this training, you should be able to be familiar with data related to trauma exposure, understand the difference between vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and occupational burnout, identify trauma exposure in our daily work, identify and monitor any personal experiences related to trauma exposure, access reference materials, tools, and suggestions to manage and support resiliency. What is the definition of a helping profession? It is defined as a profession that nurtures the growth or addresses the problems of a person's physical, psychological, intellectual, emotional, or spiritual well-being, including medicine, nursing, psychotherapy, psychological counseling, social work, education, life coaching, and ministry. You may work directly with abuse and neglect, with child welfare, or aging in people with disabilities, or domestic violence survivors in self-sufficiency, assisting individuals through call centers who are in crisis and depending on you to meet their needs. You may be a staff who works on the floor at the Oregon State Hospital and dealing with individuals in psychiatric crisis. These are just a few examples of those who are exposed to trauma on a daily basis. Understanding trauma and how it manifests itself as vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and occupational burnout is critical to understand for yourself. The need for helping professions will always exist. Research shows that between 40% and 85% of helping professionals develop vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and/or high rates of traumatic symptoms. The Department of Human Services, the Oregon Health Authority, and Oregon State Hospital employees experience trauma on a daily basis in their work. National statistics demonstrate that individuals in helping professions whose professional responsibilities include caring for another individual are at a higher risk of compassion fatigue and secondary traumatic stress. In order to gather localized research on the experiences of vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and occupational burnout in public sector helping professions, a 19-question survey was launched to staff in the Oregon State Hospital in late March of 2016. The data from the responses have been compiled to analyze and inform on issues that may be affecting the workforce as they relate to the aforementioned issues. The questions that were posed to OSH staff encompass the symptoms and signs of vicarious trauma, occupational burnout, and compassion fatigue. Understanding the sensitive and difficult nature of the questions, the assurance of confidentiality was absolute. As a result of the guarantee of privacy, we were able to obtain quite meaningful and honest information, especially in the open-ended comments section. The questions were asked on a value-based scale, with the choices represented as never, sometimes, frequently, and always. In the data displayed, you will see the number of respondents who answered each question as frequently or always. You will also see the margin of error range in reporting. Based on the total staff at OSH and the number of survey responses received, the margin of error shows the range in which the true value could fall. For example, on the question, "I have a sense of dread when working with certain clients," the percentage of staff that responded frequently or always is 16%. But based on the margin of error range, that number could be as low as 9% or as high as 22%. Of significant note, 19% of respondents stated that they frequently or always dread thinking about going to work. Additionally, approximately 28% of respondents say that they frequently or always feel a need to be hypervigilant in both their jobs and other environments. On a positive note, based on results, we can quantify that 75% of respondents never avoid hearing or witnessing clients' traumatic material, demonstrating the resiliency of these professionals.
What is vicarious trauma? Vicarious traumatization is defined as the cumulative transformative effect on the helper working with the survivors of traumatic life events. The term vicarious trauma is generally used to refer to professionals who, as a part of their job, are working with clients who are recalling or reporting traumatic events. The impacts on the worker's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and general sense of self can be similar to the difficulties faced by people we are working with. What are the symptoms that are associated with vicarious trauma? Hypervigilance, intrusive thoughts and feelings, anxiety or depression, avoidance or emotional numbing, mood swings, loss of sleep, dreaming or invasive thought about client's traumatic experience. Here is a list of effects on workplace behaviors that vicarious trauma could have on an employee at work. This list is not all-inclusive, but these are common characteristics seen with vicarious trauma. These common effects on the workplace are avoidance of certain clients, missed appointments, tardiness or absenteeism, decreased motivation, feeling trapped by work, feeling of hopelessness associated with work or clients. Often your coworker or you will be returning to the same location where vicarious trauma has occurred.
I have worked for child welfare for over a decade. When I first began as a CPS worker, I prided myself on not taking the work home with me. As I moved into positions where I had more exposure to a significant increase of abuse, it started to wear on me. I started to take my work home with me, and I began engaging in unhealthy habits. After I had my own child, it was hard for me to come back to the job. Every situation I heard had me thinking of my child, and what if they had been hurt the same way? I talked to some of my friends and learned they all have trauma related to our jobs, and no one ever talks about it. I think part of the problem is there is no acknowledgement or ongoing training to deal with the trauma we experience. From the self-sufficiency staff who respond to calls or in-person requests for help, to the caseworker determining eligibility, responding to repeated requests from families struggling to meet their most basic needs can take an emotional toll. This effect is compounded when resources in the community are not available and agency services cannot meet the need. Examples of this include safe and affordable housing, childcare, and reliable transportation.
Here is a quiz question on the subject of vicarious trauma on which we just provided a brief introduction. Which of the following can result in vicarious trauma? A. Nursing staff responding to a crisis situation after a client engages in self-harm. B. Caseworker listens to client explain sexual abuse by a caregiver. C. Support staff reviewing case history of a child witnessing father abusing sibling. D. All of the above. What is your answer? If you chose D, then you are correct. All of the above situations experienced by professionals in the workplace can result in vicarious trauma.
Compassion fatigue. What is compassion fatigue? Compassion fatigue refers to the emotional and physical exhaustion that can affect helping professionals and caregivers over time. The most insidious aspect of compassion fatigue is that it attacks at the very core of what brings helpers into this work, their empathy and compassion for others. Compassion fatigue could easily be lumped together with vicarious trauma, which we just briefly introduced you to, as well as with occupational burnout, which we will cover shortly. However, this is a subject area deserving individualized attention, as compassion fatigue can occur without experiencing trauma in the workplace and may not necessarily result in occupational burnout. Some symptoms of compassion fatigue can include nervous system arousal, increased emotional intensity, decreased cognitive ability, impaired behavior and judgment, isolation, loss of morale. Additional symptoms of compassion fatigue can include depression, PTSD, or other adjustment disorders, loss of self-worth, negatively impacted identity, worldview, and spirituality, distorted beliefs and psychological needs, loss of hope and meaning, unhealthy anger towards perpetrators. Mother Teresa understood compassion fatigue. She wrote in her plan to her superiors that it was mandatory for her nuns to take an entire year off from their duties every 4 to 5 years to allow them to heal from the effects of their caregiving work. Compassion fatigue can have some detrimental effects on the workplace, such as avoidance or dread of working with certain clients or patients, reduced ability to feel empathy towards client or patients, frequent absenteeism, lack of joyfulness, despondency. Compassion fatigue is experienced by those individuals who help others in distress. These helpers may be subsequently traumatized through their efforts to empathize and show compassion. This often leads to inadequate self-care behaviors and increased self-sacrifice in the helper role. Compassion fatigue has also been described as secondary traumatic stress resulting from caring for patients in physical and/or emotional pain or stress. Unlike post-traumatic stress disorder, the caregiver does not physically experience the traumatic event, but does experience the event emotionally by caring for the patient.
For me, this job has been extremely rewarding while also taxing. I have been working at the Oregon State Hospital for 9 years, and it has definitely changed me as a person and how I interact with the world around me. You know the stories, you have heard them before, so they come to your mind unbidden when you see the patient or talk to them. Occasionally, I am constantly barraged by horrific and sad stories that I am aware are real. I used to have bouts of feeling very sad and depressed about the world around me that had so many terrible things happening in it. Compassion fatigue is a real factor of the job. All of the clients need a lot of help and require a ton of active empathy and compassion. No one can keep that up for 8 hours a day without it wearing on your emotional energy. It is very hard to push yourself to be genuinely involved and empathetic with clients all day, every day, without a break, let alone come home to your family and be empathetic and compassionate there as well. Your child, for instance, does not understand that your emotions are worn out by the end of the day.
Based on the information just presented on compassion fatigue, please answer this quiz question. True or false? An empathetic relationship between caregiver and patient is necessary. However, this can also contribute to compassion fatigue. If you answered the question as being true, you are correct. Conscious steps by an individual need to be taken to avoid and/or lessen this condition.
Occupational burnout. The definition of occupational burnout is a unique type of job stress, a state of physical, emotional, or mental exhaustion combined with doubts about your competence and the work and the value of your work. Because high achievers are often so passionate about what they do, they tend to ignore the fact that they're working exceptionally long hours, taking on exceedingly heavy workloads, and putting enormous pressure on themselves to excel, all of which make them ripe for burnout. Some symptoms of occupational burnout are dysfunctional attitudes towards work, exhaustion, loss of motivation, distress, feelings of ineffectiveness, and poor coping mechanisms. Evidence suggests that burnout's etiology is multifactorial in nature, with dispositional factors playing an important role. One cause of burnout includes stressors that a person is unable to cope with fully. Occupational burnout often develops slowly and may not be recognized until it becomes severe. When one's expectations about a job and its reality differ, burnout can begin. How pressure is dealt with determines how much stress someone feels and how close they are to burnout. One individual can experience few stressors, but be unable to handle the pressure well and thus experience burnout. Another person, however, can experience a far greater number of stressors, but effectively deal with them and avoid burnout. Occupational burnout has many effects in the workplace environment. Staff may be cynical or critical at work, feeling delusioned about your job, increase in physical ailments resulting in missed time, irritable or impatient with others, lack of satisfaction from achievements, lacking energy or consistently being unproductive. If you think you might be experiencing job burnout, take a closer look at the phenomenon. What you learn might help you face the problem and take action before job burnout affects your health.
I was an employee of a high acuity unit at the Oregon State Hospital. I loved it. Loved the challenge, the team, the hard work. Anything could happen at any time, and it often did. I worked in an environment where the unpredictable happened, so the vigilance was real at all times. I witnessed traumatic things. I was around violence routinely. When my personal life took a steep stress hike, I decided that work stress and home stress was too much stress, and I asked supervisors to move into another equivalent position elsewhere in the hospital. While they all validated the stress level, they didn't move me. I ended up having to apply and demote to a lower paying job to get the relief I was asking for, while other equivalent positions were filled from external candidates. It was worth the move for me. However, I felt left down by the system and by the supervising professionals who didn't respond.
Based upon the information just presented on occupational burnout, please answer the following quiz question. One can experience occupational burnout by A. An inability to influence decisions that affects one's job, such as schedules, assignments, or workload. B. When a job is monotonous or chaotic, one needs constant energy to remain focused. C. If work takes up so much time and effort that there is not enough energy to spend time with family and friends. Or D. All of the above. If you selected D, then that's the correct answer.
What is resiliency? Resiliency. What is resiliency? Buoyancy, elasticity, flexibility, bounce. The capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation caused especially by compressive stress. An ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change.
I'm currently working in a call center for the Oregon Health Plan applicants. My target is 40 to 50 calls per day, 8 minutes per call. How does it affect me? It's an emotional roller coaster. Most calls are very difficult at this time. Clients are very upset and tired of hearing that they will be notified when it's done or that it's in the queue being processed but not yet completed. It's difficult to hear their stories. I spoke to a mother who is at her wit's end because her ADHD child needs his meds and is driving everyone in the household crazy because he doesn't have his meds. There was a client who was threatening suicide. I transferred her to the crisis department, but it still shook me up. I ended up leaving my desk and walking outside for a while. As the job shifted frequently from status of applications to processing applications over the phones, I noticed that I was clenching my jaw and legs. I also don't look forward to coming to work at times. I can already feel the anxiety rising as I feel incompetent in this body of work since I have not done it for a while and the process has changed again.
How do I build resiliency? Healing secondary and primary traumatic stress. We build resiliency through healthy personal relationships, relaxation, and narrative, or telling your story when feeling symptomatic of vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, or occupational burnout. Most of us arrive at working and helping professions because of strong commitment to a cause or calling. At some point, we determine whether or not we can make the changes necessary to stay true to our calling or pursue another profession. But in either case, it requires us to change something. This necessary step can inspire fear. When the pain of staying the same is greater than the fear of change, we will change. Disease is the absence of effective antibodies, not the presence of a toxic environment. When we look at disease, we do not treat the toxin or the toxic environment, but we make certain the individual can fight the disease through treatment or enhancing immunity to the toxin. Mature and resilient caregiving service. Antibody number 1 is self-regulation. Antibody 2, intentionality. Antibody 3, self-validation. Antibody 4, connective support. Antibody 5, self-care, or refueling. We can regulate our stress response through awareness and management of our own nervous system. The simple act of relaxing our pelvic floor muscles reduces our stress response and its resulting stress hormones, and it returns our brain to a better state of reasoning and awareness. It switches us from our nervous system's defense against attack to a mode in which the body can heal and nourish itself. Improved spatial reasoning, conscious thought, and language functioning can happen in 20 to 30 seconds. It's possible to experience stress in this condition. You're comfortable in one's own skin. One way to do this is to become aware of your pelvic floor by noticing where your sit bones make contact with the chair and touching your pelvic bones or hip bones at your side. This brings awareness to the 4 points that, when connected, create a plane called the pelvic floor. Once you are aware of your pelvic floor, you can practice relaxing it by unclenching your bottom or sit muscles. In 20 seconds, you are able to return to a stress-less body and properly thinking brain. This is a visual representation of what your pelvic floor should do: unclench and expand. Building resiliency. Antibody number 2, intentionality. This requires self-regulation. It is mission-driven. It is principle-based and requires tolerance to pain for growth. Antibody 3 is self-validation. We need to understand that our work is a choice versus a demand. We relinquish outcomes. We're caregiving from a mission. We're resilient to judgment by clients and peers. It can be spiritually based. We have a sense of potency balanced with humility. In other words, the outcomes of our work are not under our control, only the opportunity to do our best work and generate hope. Because you are a professional caregiver, you are essentially choosing to give without the requirement of rewards or recognition. Your workplace is your opportunity to engage in your calling and practice your principles. Due to the nature of the calling, your workplace will continue to demand more from you than you can give. It is up to us to manage the inherent stress of helping professionals by building resiliency. It is up to our organization to foster environments that support the opportunity to engage your calling without becoming symptomatic. Antibody number 4, self-care. Aerobic activity 3 times a week. Fuel for enduring burning, such as music, art, or sport that combines discipline and improvisation. Be active instead of passive. Engage in solitude, spirituality, and nature, and follow an intentional plan. Antibody number 5, building connection. Narrate painful, traumatic work experiences. Empower a safe few to confront when symptomatic. Exercise the ability to safely tell on yourself. Maintain accountability. Be your authentic self. Take responsibility to train those in your support group. Create community. To summarize, the 5 antibodies of resiliency are self-regulation, intentionality, perceptual maturation or self-validation, connection, and self-care.
Take some time to honestly assess the amount of stress in your life and find ways to reduce it before it's too late. Burnout isn't like the flu. It doesn't go away after a few weeks unless you make some changes in your life. The Professional Quality of Life Scale, also known as the ProQual, is a personal assessment tool that may be useful to you. It is a scale to assess compassion satisfaction, burnout, secondary traumatic stress. Management is encouraged to utilize this to assess their teams and are reminded that confidentiality should be of utmost importance. Please feel free to explore the following recommended resources. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about compassion fatigue, occupational burnout, and vicarious trauma. We hope that the education and tools on these topics will support and assist you in developing resiliency to continue the great work that you do for Oregonians. We encourage you to take the opportunity to engage in open dialogue and conversations about these issues. And in conclusion, we would like to recognize the following resources vital to this project.